then we divide it by GDP.
I don't know how, like, so again, it works, it does like, is that one, or is that too good for us all? Whatever, I don't know how to get this, because see, like, this is my rationale.
So we see that that doesn't change. That was our assumption, that we use the average propensity to consume, and that's what we get. 75, out of every $100 of income, you'll be spending 75.8 of it on consumption. Now we'll do the same for input. Equals 100
And then that was 0 to south.
times
Instead of the market.
that divided by this looks like a rather rapidly growing phenomenon, but not too bad. But in 2011, we have imports at 66% of GDP, and we see it projecting it up to 2025, up to just 4% of GDP. Now let's work out what the investments. Under scenario 1, we have the investment share. Go back to the sheet I gave you. Go to scenario 1.
How do we use the regression analysis?
Then the investment share is 0.205677.
Margin of propensity to consume.
So it's
Y
This is the equal to.
Y times Y.
C times something.
0.205 677 times Y.
Where did you get that number?
It is measured.
It's really weird. Where did you get that number? His favorite number.
And now we can look at that share. We know the answer to that already. It would be equal to 100 times divided by Y. So, every $100 worth of GDP, about $75.80 of it will go in consumption, and another $20.60 will go for investment by the private sector. But these imports are going to account for about 62 to 74% of it. Right? Now, some of these imports go into consumption. Some of these imports will go into investment. And some of these imports will also go into government. What would be a government import? Can anybody guess? Usually, in many countries, it's the most important import in the country.
Oil.
about like employing the services of like an economist from a different country or something?
What a very important government, a very important government import.
Military?
Exactly.
Oh, good job.
Tanks, airplanes. Why does the government import those things?
When you say airplanes, I'm talking about airplanes.
Probably not the answer.
When they're after. Why does the government support all that armament? Does anybody know? No good reason. The only reason why they import it is to show that they got an army, and the army can double as a police force. Keep their own people in mind. Huh? What are the jobs at the UN that we have? I'll give you a little background about what the work was at the UN, because I know some of you think that the UN doesn't do anything.
Amen.
Where's the zero? And this is supposed to be error. What just happened? Use the consumption function for the time out.
Now, in every country, they have a set of ministries.
I get it.
The most important ministry in every country, does anybody know the most important ministries in any country?
Economic planning.
Finance.
Finance.
Actually went to a different page, and I actually ran a version
That's the most
Finance and
important.
economic planning.
What is the next most important?
First, you have to find
Economic planning?
by running a version.
It's not even a ministry. Huh?
The Russian was why.
Foreign ministry.
Foreign ministry.
Okay. What would the inputs for the Russian?
Foreign ministry, the next most important, all right? And then after that, they have a bunch of other ministries.
And what was the intersection? Y
For
plus one.
example, they may have a ministry of education.
Is
They have another ministry of health.
You have to do a reversion of YT plus one.
They might have
Agriculture.
Plus one is just
Yeah.
drag
an industry
2011, 2010, pasted from 2000.
and a ministry of agriculture.
Plus one. Copy this whole thing. This whole thing. Copy this whole thing. You put on the to what? Yeah, all it was.
this
Then we're gonna
And so on. And they might have some other ministries.
first off.
But the most powerful one is the finance. This is the most powerful one. And they control the purse strings,
And X,
followed by the foreign ministry. Because the foreign ministry works on getting other countries to give money. Now, the UN is broken down into a whole bunch of organizations. All right. They have, in Rome, we have an organization called FAO, Food and Agricultural Organization.
drag down.
In Paris, they have one called UNESCO.
UNESCO.
Usually the Ministry of Labor as well.
UNIDO.
ILO.
Hello.
In Vienna, they have one called UNIDO, which deals with industry. In Geneva,
WHO.
they have one called WHO, World Health Organization. These are specialized agencies of the UN. And they're all there with good intentions to help poor people better their lives. But in New York, where they have headquarters of the UN, the ministers from these two places come. Whenever they have the General Assembly in the fall, representatives from the Foreign Ministry and the Ministry of Finance come to New York. Right? The ministers from Education, they go to Paris, they go to UNESCO. Health guys go to Geneva, they go to WHO. Industry guys go to Vienna, they go to this. The agriculture guys go to Rome, they go there. And these guys also go to Geneva. They go. So what they have in New York, representing the country, are the foreign minister and the minister of finance. All right? Now, what we spent our time doing was trying to convince these guys that they're wasting money on armament. Too much money on armament. Why? First of all, they have to pay international prices for it. The tank is a tank. You know, if you buy a German tank, you pay a lot of money for it. No matter where you buy, you pay a lot of money. So we say, look, don't buy all that stuff. Instead, take that money and use it for these things: education, health, developing your industry, your agriculture, and your labor. That is the basic politics of the UN. That's what it's all about. How do you get developing countries to divert their expenditure on military and move it towards the things that makes their society richer and healthier? And that's all the papers we wrote. And we're doing all these projections based upon that idea.
Now, where does UNDP fall?
Sorry?
UNDP, the UN Development Program. What
Yeah,
is it for?
what UNDP does, this is called United Nations Development Program. And basically what they do is they work with these ministries. They work with these areas. And they set up projects in developing countries, all right, for each of these areas. For example, they'll set up a factory somewhere in a developing country to produce something that they don't produce before. It might be water pumps, something like that, something that would be very useful for the country. So these are called projects. UNDP does project development in developing countries. If you work for UNDP, you find yourself living in developing countries most of the time, because that's what they do. They send their offices to developing countries. They're all specialists in something in that project. They might be engineers, they might be economists, or whatever they do. One of the things they do is now, before they set up a project in a developing country, they have to have an ecological impact study done on the area of that project. So they send out environmentalists to see what would happen if they were to put a project in that place. Very typical what happens in a developing country, you have a river, and the project is right here next to the river. Now, why did they put the project next to the river? So they could put it on a boat and send it downstream. But at the same time, if you're not careful, they may be dumping into the river some of their waste.
Pollution.
And you get pollution. And then you get a lot of people who live along the river.
Egypt or something like that.
You have these little villages around the project, people live around the river, and they use the river to wash their clothes, to take a bath, and they even drink sometimes, the water out.
It happens here. General Electric and lots of companies. They still have.
So that's what UNDP does. UNDP is involved in these projects, and they look at the environmental impact of it, and they try to get us going. Now what happens, unfortunately, there is a lot of corruption in many of these countries. So what they do is they get a project, say, to build a factory. And it'll be done through, say, the Ministry of Industry. Very typically, these countries have their own organizations. For example, in Africa, they'll have an organization of French-speaking countries. They'll have an organization of Southern African countries, an organization for Eastern African countries. And they have meetings. They have their own economists. And they have meeting rooms that look just like the UN in New York. And at those meetings, they'll hang out a laundry list of projects they would like to have in their countries. Once they put up those projects, then donor countries, usually from Europe or in the developed countries, will bid on those projects. They say, well, we'd like to come and do that for you. And then the corrupt officials will say, well, we got an offer from such and such country. And what happens very typically is that sometimes when you have high unemployment in developed countries, the government's looking for a way to help unemployed people. And one of the ways they'll do it is to have a project in a developing country and give the business to their domestics who are unemployed to work on that project.
Why poor people don't take advantage of that? Why poor people don't take proper advantage of this?
No, well, what happens basically is the people who work in the ministry in the developing country will negotiate the deal with the donor country in the developed country. Right?
Yeah.
And what happens usually, they say, suppose they're dealing with the Dutch. They say, well, we'll take care of that project for you. And we'll send our Dutch engineers and the Dutch construction crew to your country to build that project. And they say, no, not unless you give me a little kickback. Otherwise, we give it to the Belgians.
Right.
And so, they do. And a lot of people who work in developing countries expect that. So they give them a little bit. So the ministers who are involved in the project, they stuff their pockets. They build the factory, and they get it going, and 4 years later, all weeds are growing around the factory, and they close it down. Because there's no longer interested people in the ministry, they can't make any more money on it. They'd rather tear it down and start a new project where they can make some money on it. That's where UNDP comes in. UNDP will come in and say, look, we'll eliminate that nonsense. We'll put that in there, we'll put that project going for you, and there'll be no kickback. And they work it out that way. So they're not necessarily welcome. Sometimes they are, sometimes they're not. But it means when they go, it's not the usual kickback. They go there with the intention of putting something there and making it work. Very different. They give you a lesson of what the UN is all about right there. And what you do, what I did, when I was working in the UN, I was able to trace armament exports and imports from developed countries to developing countries all over the world. And then I sent that data out to people who were interested. There were a lot of people who are anti-war, who were really interested. I dug up the armament data through computers. Because they have on our computers, in the UN computers, all the trade between countries. And they even list the armament. And if you look very careful, you can find it. And then you can, for example, during the war that Argentina had with the English over the Malvinas Islands, I was able to trace the Argentine imports of armament at the end of the war. At the end of the war, the Brits had destroyed most of their armament, and the generals went out and promptly bought new stuff. And you can see where it came from. It came from Czechoslovakia, it came from all over the place. Right there. That's a fact of life. And unfortunately, the poor people of developing countries, they're the ones who are the victims of all of that. Let's go back to looking at our projections.
Can you have for C so we can see what you did, because I went blank. I had an aneurysm.
So the next thing we want to do is take a look at government.
Professor, could you show us how you got the seed consumption for the first scenario again?
Regression.
Well, I
Yeah,
know
we got the regression.
After regression, do you?
You just multiply the marginal propensity consumed by
The regression?
by Y.
By Y and add on the A.
Okay.
There are two, look at the equation. A plus B times Y.
Okay, but I'm saying since my intercept was 0, like yours, you just add the.
You
So
have
it's
0.
B times Y. So it's just
okay.
B times Y.
I got you.
Okay, this is fine. Okay,
It's
that's
the
all I
same
wanted.
thing. It's the same thing as.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I know Eastern Armenian. Oh.
Anybody get a positive A?
No.
Nobody got a positive A? They do exist.
I actually don't know. I do have a friend who's Armenian.
Out there somewhere.
I'm not going to say that because I know you're saying
Unfortunately, the United States has a negative intercept as well. And it's been a big problem.
I just did.
Now the question of, what about government? How do we handle government? Let's try first to handle
That's a great
government the
question.
same way we did consumption. See if that gives us a reasonable model. But government's not behavioral. There's no economic justification to say that automatically that income determines what government spending. It does indirectly. All right. Because if income is high in the country, then more people will be working, and more taxes will be paid. The government will have more revenue, and the government will spend more. But if you've got a government full of Republicans, like, they'll say, it doesn't matter how much money we get, we're not going to spend more. So it's a political negotiation. On the other hand, you might have a government that spends more even though they don't have money. And there are different ways, different tricks they use for that. For example, they might say, well, this money is for education. But they don't tell you it's for education of military officers. For the cadet corps. Or this money is for hospitals, for health. But it might be a military hospital, and so on. Things like that. But in any case, we'll try that first and see what happens when we set G to GDP and see if we get a reasonable looking consumption function. If not, we'll look at other things. It might be but doing G, it helps to have a good idea. We know what the government budget is and why the budget has that kind of budget. So that takes a little work. So now we'll take imports out of government. So this is what we get from government. Once again, we get this negative thing. It's okay, the governments do go into debt, so we can leave that negative thing there. The negative of government spending is government debt.
Aha. What's the regression? What's the regression from? Is it
It's the same
G and Y?
Yeah.
Okay, so G is
G
X.
and Y, and then you
G is
do
Y,
A
and
equals
Y is X.
Yes.
Okay.
Y will always be X.
Okay, I gotta remember that.
And
Or Y number.
because it's the CGI, it'll all be A plus B.
But
That's the
Y-
government
Yeah,
equivalent.
because X is the independent variable, right? And Y is the
Yeah,
independent
that's
variable,
right,
so
yes.
X, Y will always be X. Okay, makes sense. Okay.
Let's see how they share it.
Sitting to.
G equals Hey, it's Gabby. I'm not seeing that.
All right. Actually, this government projection looks pretty reasonable, very steady. It shows that government spending in this country was around 12%. A very reasonable percentage for government spending. You know what it is in the United States? Government spending? What? Anybody know what the government ratio is in the United States?
No.
But 19%. And that's what the Republicans are screaming about, too high. They would love to get it down to 12%. Now, having done this, okay, this is our projection based upon demand. However, in order for this to come out, we have to satisfy the national accounts identity. Because in the end, when the statistical office does the counting, it's going to be equal, or equal very close, with small margin of error, right? So, in order to do this accounting, the exports are going to have to fall in line for this scenario to materialize. Exports will have to be something. And that something is this. When you add up C plus G plus I plus X and subtract that, you got to get this.
Okay.
Let me write it on the board here. Y is equal to C plus G plus I plus X minus F. That holds true in the future as well as in the past. It's got to hold true. Because that's what the national statisticians are going to pull in their books. So if we bring all these over to the other side, we get X is equal to Y minus C minus G minus I plus M. In order to satisfy that equation. So we'll see what the X comes out.
Yeah, how to get I?
It'll be equal
I thought it was the same.
Y
It's the same thing.
minus C minus G
Yeah,
minus
the Y range would be
I
the X range would be Y. So it's the same.
plus M. And M is going to be G17. So that's the X.
Is that not right?
That has to be the X. If the C, the G, the I, the M that we get, that's what has to be the X.